International Business, Masters of Commerce, second semester, Mangalore University, session 7. In this session, you're going to learn about the trade theories. Learning objective to understand about the trade theories. Session outcome the students are able to understand the trade theories and how it has relevance over the international business. International trade. The trade in simple terms means sale, purchase, or exchange of goods and services between people or entities. From, from the international perspective, trade would arise when sale, purchase, or exchange of goods and services takes place across national boundaries. Why do nations trade in international trade? The main question in economics of trade is why nations trade. What need to be clarified is to why they trade. The availability of middlemen and transport can only facilitate trade, not cause it. Why? In the first place, do they do so? What is it that makes people so who live far away, speak different languages, and operate under different legal and economic systems take the trouble of exchanging goods and services? There are three views about why nations trade. The economic view tells there must be economic gains from trade for both the sides. Resource based view tells that nations trade because some firms in one nation generate exports that are valuable, unique, and hard to imitate. Third, the institution based view. There are different rules that govern the trade which determine how gains are shared amongst the nations. The trade theory. The answer to the question why nations engage in international trade is there in the trade theory. Trade theory starts with why different nations or countries trade and ends by discussing the benefits to countries engaged in such trade. International trade theory helps in explaining the pattern of trade as well as the distribution of gains arising from such trade. It also helps in explaining the observed trade and reduces the effect of trade on the domestic economy. Thus, trade theory provides answers to questions like why do nations trade? What do they trade? Is trade a good thing? Mercantilism. The term mercantile system was first coined by Adam Smith that describes a political economy in which nations encourage exports and restrain imports in order to increase the financial wealth. The goal of mercantilism lies in achieving favorable balance of trade that would bring in more gold and silver into the economy because possession of wealth, gold and silver considered as the sign of a strong nation. In short, increasing gold holding by augmenting exports and restricting imports laid the root of this theory. The mercantile system was dominant in the Western Europe, especially in Holland, France, UK, Belgium, Portugal, and Spain from 16th to the late 18th centuries. These nations adopted the policies of growth, government intervention, colonization, and trade surpluses to accomplish the goal of mercantilism. These three policies worked together. At that time, the possession of wealth, gold, and silver was considered as a sign of a strong nation. Absolute advantage theory. This theory was given by Adam Smith in the second half of 18th century as he strongly criticized the mercantilist assumption that trade is a zero-sum game and advocated free trade as it enlarges a country's wealth. Absolute advantage theory simply implies that a country should import goods that are cheaper abroad, that is, when the cost of importing goods from other country is less than the cost of producing it domestically, and export goods which it can produce more efficiently than other countries. It will become clearer with the help of an example. Suppose there are two countries, India and Bangladesh. Both countries are capable of producing radios and fans. The underlying assumption is that both use just one factor of production, that is, labor. Both countries are endowed with 10 labor hours each that can be utilized to produce these two commodities. Here, India has absolute advantage in the production of radios and Bangladesh in the production of fans because India can produce 30 units of radios and 20 units of fans with 10 labor hours available for each. On the other, Bangladesh can produce 10 units of radios and 50 units of fans. It is very clear from the example shown in given figure depicting the production possibility frontiers and the table that there is gain from trade when India is producing radio and Bangladesh producing fans with available entire resources because after trade the aggregate production of both the countries increased from 40 units to 60 units for radios and from 70 units to 100 units. So, India should produce radio and export it to Bangladesh and import fans from there. On the other, Bangladesh should produce fans and export to India and import radio from there. This trade leads to complete specialization where India is specialized in the production of radios and Bangladesh in the production of fans. According to Adam Smith, trade arises due to absolute differences in costs. Smith's argument of absolute advantage and trade seems to be very convincing, but it assumes, and rather unnecessarily, that international trade requires the producer of exports to have an absolute advantage and an importing country to have an absolute disadvantage. That is, an exporting industry must be able to produce with a given amount of capital and labor a larger output than any rival. However, Adam Smith's analysis was far narrow and a more comprehensive theory was needed to explain general theory of international trade. Adam Smith's analysis was incapable of dealing with the kind of situation where a country had no line of production in which it was clearly superior. Robert Torrance and David Ricardo elaborated the Adam Smith statement by formulating a more general theory of international trade. The comparative advantage. The classical theory of international trade is also known as the theory of comparative cost propounded by David Ricardo. It was further developed by J.S. Mill, Cairns, Bastables, and von Haberler, who were the modern exponents of the theory. The theory of comparative cost is based on the following assumptions. The first is the labor cost is the only cost of production. Second, all units of labor are homogeneous. Labor is perfectly mobile within the country and perfectly immobile between the countries. Third, transport costs are zero. Fourth, production is subject to law of constant returns to scale. Fifth, the theory was 2 cross 2 model, that is, trade takes place between two countries, two commodities, and two factors. Sixth, product and factor markets are perfectly competitive. Ricardo explains the comparative cost advantage with an arithmetical illustration. England and Portugal are the two countries where wine and cloth are the two commodities produced. The following table explains this. Portugal has an absolute cost advantage in the production of both cloth and wine, but they have a comparative cost advantage only in the production of wine, as given by 80 divided by 120 is lesser than 90 divided by 100. England has a comparative disadvantage in the production of both the goods, but they have smaller comparative disadvantage in the production of cloth as given by 100 divided by 90 is lesser than 120 divided by 80. Therefore, they specialize in the production of cloth. They export cloth to they export cloth to Portugal and import wine from Portugal. Thereby, both countries gain from trade. The theory of comparative cost is basically a simple extension of the principle of division of labor. Though Ricardo's comparative cost theory is an improvement over the absolute cost theory, the actual terms of trade was not considered by him. Ricardo's theory was incomplete as it focused attention only on the supply side and ignored the demand side. As Haberler put it, this doctrine simplifies reality too much to be adequate. This theory fails to establish the precise terms of profitable exchange. The theory has been criticized on the grounds that the two country to commodity trade was unrealistic, immobility of labor internationally and mobility nationally was also illogical. Ricardo's theory was further developed by John Stuart Mill, Alfred Marshall, and Edgeworth, who considered both demand and supply. Thank you.